so to be aware of an itch when you're sitting in meditation practice is natural and normal. In our practice, however, what we're practicing is not to scratch it.
Right.
And to experience that if you don't scratch an itch, it comes and it goes. This is a very important aspect of the teaching and the practice, because we're learning to be with life instead of resist life or reject life or struggle with life or cope with life. And the way to be with life is to let life happen, and the way life happens is things come and they go, right? Life is impermanent. The reality of the way things occur in life is called impermanence. Everything is in constant flux. Everything is changing all the time. And the fact that everything is changing all the time can be a source of stress, because we're trying in this ever-changing reality to experience something that's consistent so we can experience some degree of peace. We're trying in this ever-changing reality to experience a sense of well-being, a sense of happiness, a sense of contentment. And that's not easy to come by when you're in a world that never stays the same. It's not easy to come by not only when you're in a world that never stays the same, but when you're in an experience that never stays the same either. So what do you have? You have an ever-changing world, you have a mind, an ever-changing mind, you have a body, an ever-changing body. These things are changing all the time. So one of the things that human beings do in life is try and find a way to get something to stay the same, so I can get familiar with it, have a deeper experience of it. And so we do a lot of different kinds of things to get things to stay the same, but no matter what we do, it doesn't change the fact of impermanence. And so one of the things that the ancient teachings tell us is that the fact of impermanence and the idea that human beings want things to be a certain way or to stay a certain way or to not change is the source of suffering. And this can be easily witnessed if you pay attention to your own mind. And one of the things that is part of the benefits of the practice is before you begin to practice and before you begin to wake up and experience things as they are, you're experiencing being a physical body and a personality living in the world. That's it. Physical body and a personality living in the world. And if you look at your life, that's basically it. The body gets up in the morning, the personality wakes up with the body, the thought process starts, you start to think about the day, and then you start to go into the day as a physical body living in the world, thinking about it. And that's how life goes day after day. Everything keeps changing, and so we're constantly looking for this consistency. I mean, maybe the only thing that's actually consistent in your life is your name. I can't think of anything else that's consistent in your life. Not even really your name, because people change their names too, But if you don't change your name, that's one thing that's the same every day when you wake up. The body appears to be the same every day when you wake up, but it's not, because it's changing slow, so you don't see it. But after 10, 20, 30, 40 years, if you pay attention to the mirror, you can see that the truth is your body has been changing. And not necessarily in a good way either, right? Because that baby skin has got wrinkles. That baby face is old, right? And so this life that we're living is a temporary affair that begins with the life of a baby, goes now up to 80, 90, 100 years if you're lucky. But it's a constantly changing situation, and it peaks out at around 45, 50 and then starts to decline. So that's what we're dealing with here, is time, a limited experience of being alive. And so the question becomes, what is this? That's a Zen koan. What is this? What am I? What's going on here? How does this work? How do I experience being satisfied, happy, and peaceful in the world, the way this world is? It's a good question. It's an important question. And through the practice of meditation, one of the things that you come to discover, not just conceptually, but as a direct experience, right, is that there is one thing you can count on. There is one thing that never changes, that stays the same, and that is the awareness itself. And what the teachings tell us is this is the actuality of what we are. This is our true nature. This never changes. It's always exactly the same. Your awareness is the same today as it was yesterday. It's the same today as it was when you were 5 years old. And it'll be the same until you take your last breath. So this gives us somewhere that we can depend on for consistency. And not only does it give us somewhere that we can depend on for consistency, but as we begin to experience this never-changing awareness, it begins to be possible to understand and realize that when we're experiencing ourselves as what we actually are, there is an experience of contentment, satisfaction, well-being, and peace. Why? Because this awareness has no form. This awareness doesn't change. This awareness doesn't need anything. This awareness doesn't want anything. This awareness is not a male or a female. It doesn't exist in time. It only exists in the present moment. And so when we're experiencing that, we're experiencing well-being. And that's what people are chasing, you know. So if you're new to meditation, or even if you're still in the beginning phase of meditation, you may notice that you're experiencing frustration when you go to practice meditation. Because just like everything else, when people start to practice meditation, they have their concepts and ideas about it and their beliefs about it. And they're doing it because they want something. They're doing it because they may have heard about the possibility that it provides peace, that it provides a state of relaxation, it provides a better quality of life. It makes you more effective in living your life. So people hear all these things, and then when you sit to practice meditation, you sit there waiting for that to happen. And of course, in the beginning of practicing meditation, that doesn't happen. All you find yourself doing is putting up with the experience of going back and forth between the thought activity and paying attention to the body breathing. But in time, if you stay with the practice, over time, that changes. Over time, if you stay with the practice, you begin to experience the reality of what you are, because when you're practicing meditation, you're focusing on the body breathing and you're not thinking, the personality is not available, because the personality occurs in thinking. When you're thinking, you're being your personality. When you're simply being aware of the body breathing, you're being the awareness. And when you're being the awareness, all of the baggage and all of the unworkability of the thought process is no longer happening, and you have the opportunity to experience what many teachers call don't know mind. Or one teacher called it beginner's mind, empty mind. The awareness is empty. And so when you're experiencing yourself as this emptiness, as this don't know mind, as you live your life, your empty mind and your don't know mind can allow what's happening to be seen as it is, because there is no prior beliefs about it, there's no prior conditioning about it. You actually see things as they actually are, because you're approaching it without any previous concepts or understanding about it. And the only way you can do that is by experiencing your true nature, which is empty all the time. So you really have to understand that it's necessary to make a commitment to the practice to get to that experience. And the personality is a impatient character. The personality wants what it wants now, and because we live in the world of Amazon, it makes it even easier to think it's realistic to get everything you want now, not tomorrow, not in a minute. So when people come out of that condition and sit and try and meditate, they experience frustration, impatience, irritability, restlessness, and so forth. So you've got to sit that out. You've got to take the attitude that a baby has. And what I mean by that is when a baby watches the adults walking around, the baby starts to crawl and starts to get up and try and stand up, right? And when a baby starts to practice standing up and getting balance and walking, right? The baby is undeterred. Do you ever notice that? Baby will never give up trying to walk. And that's why babies end up walking, right? Because they're undeterred. They will not allow anything to get in the way of continuing to learn how to walk and practicing learn how to walk. And the reason they can do that is because they don't have any prior conditioning about it. You know, they don't try and walk and every time they fall down say, oh shit, I must not be a good walker. You know, they just keep going for it again and again and again. And this is the attitude that's necessary if you want to establish a meditation practice. You have to have an attitude of a commitment that's unstoppable. And you can maintain that commitment by understanding that you can have faith and you can trust that the result will be had by you if you stay the course, if you walk the path, if you do this every single day without fail. It can't not be otherwise. We talk about the fact that if you practice meditation, gradually what happens is you wake up. What does waking up mean? Waking up means instead of living your life as a thought process, you start to live your life as your true nature, as the awareness itself. And when you're living your life as a thought process and you're living your life leaving your physical body and your personality, in the traditions they call that dreaming. They call that being asleep. Right? And so through the practice of meditation, you begin to come out of that dream state. You begin to realize thinking about life is not experiencing life. Thinking in life is applying your conditioning to life. And when you apply your conditioning to life, what constantly happens is you keep dealing with what's happening as it's being compared to what you believe should be happening or what you want to happen or what you think is the right thing to happen, right? And if you pay attention, if you develop your ability to consistently pay attention and watch your day as it happens, you will see over and over again in your day, things happen and the mind resists what's happening or rejects what's happening because the mind has it figured out that you know the way it should be. And the way it should be is the way you want it to be. The way it should be is the way it feels right. The way it should be. And when it's not the way it should be, you go into a state called being upset. I expected it to be this way and it wasn't that way and now I'm upset. I expected there to be no cars in front of me when I left here to go home and now I'm upset. I expected the people in my life to always behave the way I want them to, and when they don't, I get upset. Right? So if you begin to pay attention to this, you'll see your life is a series of insults. Life is a series of insults. And it's not a pretty picture, and it's not an experience of well-being and happiness, contentment, satisfaction, and peace. And so if you're really interested in having that experience, you have to give up the pursuit of happiness and start to come to an understanding through the teachings and practices that happiness is something you already have, but you haven't been paying attention to it. You've been paying attention to the thought activity, which is your conditioning, and that thought activity is a process in which you're constantly comparing what you think, what you believe, what you want, how you feel to what's going on. And when it's not a match, you get upset. You get stressed out. Your heart beats faster. You hold your breath. You try and figure out a solution to get out of this predicament that you find yourself in. And if you get too frustrated, you'll end up on prescribed medication. Or now legal marijuana. Or whatever else, works for you. It doesn't have to even be prescriptions or drugs. It could just be watching a lot of TV or becoming obsessed with anything that you can keep your attention involved in so you don't have to experience yourself. People don't want to experience themselves when you're a personality, because if you experience yourself when you're a personality, you experience a mess. If you practice meditation consistently over time, eventually, gradually, as you wake up and come into contact with things as they really are, you begin to discover that you don't have any questions. You begin to discover that things are as they are. There's nothing to have any question about. Everything is actually obvious. Things are as they are. But you can't experience things as they are when you're living your life in a thought process, because the thought process is always comparing what's happening to the way it should be. It's happening so automatically that it's not something you're necessarily aware of. You're aware of the upset that manifests, you're aware of the suffering that goes along with it, but you're not necessarily aware of how that's happening and whether there's a way out of that. People just keep trying again and again and again, using the things that they learned that they think will get life to work, and then continually experience failure. Because the life of a personality is a failure. The life of a personality is the life of a separate self. The life of a personality is the life of a very limited separate self that lives as a concept in your mind, a self-concept. And everybody's thought processes are different based on their conditioning. And so everybody has a different version of reality, of what they think reality is, right? And because everybody has a different version of what they think reality is, conflict is inevitable, right? Yeah, because if I think it should be this way and you think it should be that way, and we have to share our space together, we have to share life together, then it's inevitable that conflict arises, and you try and impose your reality on me, I try and impose my reality on you, and then we get married. As a way of trying to find a way out of that mess. Right. Meditation. In the beginning, you're not experiencing meditation. In the beginning, you're experiencing a restlessness and a busy mind. Right? But if you stay with this and you keep coming back to the body breathing so that you're focused on the present moment, and if you do this over time so that you start to experience the possibility of stillness, you start to experience the possibility of peacefulness and calmness and satisfaction, a state of well-being, you start to experience that experience. Once you're familiar with it, once you've had what they call Kensho in Zen, which means you had a direct experience of your true nature, and you're practiced sufficiently, right, then you can lie down and practice. But in the beginning, if you do that, you'll just fall asleep. Right. You'll just go unconscious. Makes sense. Yeah, so it's just a practical matter, that's all. Yeah. It's like anything else. If you go to learn how to play the piano, to sit down at the piano and expect to play music is naive, right? So you have to be a beginner. You have to have a beginner's mind. You have to practice as a beginner. And as you get better at it, you can play music. As you get better at it, you can experience your true nature all the time. As you get better at meditation and familiar with what it feels like to be you, they actually talk about this in the teaching. They say the word enlightenment means to simply remember. Because you've always been what you actually are. You're not going to become it. You've always been what you actually are. This is about stopping having your attention be taken by what you're not, right? If you're having your attention be taken by what you're not, it means you're thinking, and when you're thinking, it's the action of the personality. When we learn to think, we learn that we're the thinker of our thoughts, right? And people don't question their thoughts, they follow them. That's why people are miserable. Right? But we're not the thinker of our thoughts, and through meditation we can discover that that's the truth. If you start to pay attention to thoughts, you'll discover there's two ways that thinking happens, right? One way that thinking happens is when you're using thinking to do practical things. You use it to drive your car, you use it to do your work, right? And when you're using thinking to do practical things, that's not a problem. But when you stop using thinking to do practical things, right, the thinking activity continues, it doesn't stop. And when you're not using it for practical things, what the brain scientists tell us is you go into what's called the default state. The default state means I'm not using thinking to do anything practical right now, and so the thinking is on its own, it continues to play, and this default state is about me and mine and what I want and what I like and how I feel and what happened to me in the past and what will happen to me in the future. I'm totally preoccupied when I'm in the default state, because when I'm in that state of being a personality, I'm the most important person in the world, right? And I pay attention to myself as the most important person in the world, and I pay attention to what I want, whether I'm getting what I want, what I like, what's happening, but I'm getting what I need, This is called an egocentric existence, right? I look at everything as it relates to me, right? Do I like it? Do I want it? Is it working for me? Am I getting what I want from it? This is the condition in which we live when we're in the form of a personality. Through meditation, we can learn to let go of that and discover the possibility of being in a no form, being in a state of awareness that has no form, a state of awareness that has no conditioning, and so we can be in a don't know mind and experience life in a fresh way and see things as they actually are, instead of bringing our beliefs and our conditioning to everything that's happening and comparing that to what's happening to see if what's happening is what it's supposed to be. That's a life of suffering. That's a life of constantly wanting what you don't have, constantly trying to get your shit together, trying to figure it out, trying to come up with new and better strategies. It's an improvement process, self-improvement. Right? One of my favorite teachers wrote a book called Death, the End of Self-Improvement. So, meditation works. The question is, are you going to hear what I've said here and understand the possibility that you can have everything you want in your life by practicing something that will bring you out of an unworkable mental state? And then you can enjoy your life instead of continually coping with it and trying to get it to work and struggling with it. And if you wake up to your true nature so that true nature becomes available as you live your life, then life will clear up in the process of living itself.